On this episode of The Breakthrough Show, on behalf of everyone here at the Breakthrough Show Network, we want to wish all veterans of the United States Armed Forces a happy Veterans Day, and we thank you for your service. In honor of Veterans Day, we welcome a multi-passionate speaker and veteran, Farron Dozier, to the show. Farron joins us at the Hot Topics table to share about the importance of mental health for our veterans, as well as the choice to be a voice for different communities. Then we meet an entrepreneur bold enough to buy a chocolate factory when he doesn't even like chocolate. Ray Blakeney is here. As the last new guest of this season of The Breakthrough Show, Ray brings some incredible stories and breakthroughs to the aspiring entrepreneurs of the world and more. Don't miss another incredible episode today.
Life gives us moments when we have the opportunity to make a choice, and what we choose has the potential to change our lives forever. Join us now for another inspired episode of The Breakthrough. And now, please welcome the creator and host of the show, Jessica Dugas.
Welcome back to The Breakthrough Show. I'm so excited to be here with you for another episode today. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I am thankful that you are joining us today for the daytime talk show, inspiring you to change the way you look at and live your life through inspirational stories, entertainment, and of course, hot topics. This episode today is premiering around Veterans Day, and you guys know, based on our history here at the show and some of what I've shared personally in my life, how important our veterans are to me. And so we're going to touch a little bit on that today. Coming up later on the show, by the way, you guys, these are our last guests officially, our last new guests of the season. So I'm really excited about that today. We are going out with a bang for season 5. Coming up later on the show, we have Ray Blakeney, who is probably, I mean, one of the most multi-passionate entrepreneurs. And you guys, he doesn't like chocolate and once owned a chocolate factory. We have to hear more about this. So we're going to connect with Ray later on the show. But coming up first on the show, we have a veteran and another really multi-passionate person, someone who is doing a lot in the sickle cell community. He's doing a lot for veterans. He's a youth mentor. Is there anything he doesn't do? We're going to find out. Please welcome to the show, Farron Dozier. Farron, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm good. It's really good to have you here. You are into a lot of different things, my friend, and we're not surprised because we happen to host like every multi-passionate person on the planet here. Yes. But I would love for you to start out by sharing with our audience something that's bringing you joy today.
My grandson, and I also want to say, because I did learn that happiness comes from within just as much as outside. So being able to wake up today is also a joy for me, especially when you deal with health issues. So I don't want the listeners to, as we have a conversation today, that joy and happiness comes from within first. So a lot of times we look for outside resources or things to make us happy. So my grandson definitely does make me happy, but then I have to look within myself first, and definitely waking up this morning is the gift. So yeah,
absolutely. Well, you wake up this morning and you get to enjoy the grandson, right? So
exactly.
It's got to come. One's got to come before the other.
Exactly. They work together.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you talked about that too, though, because when I started having my own health issues a few years ago, I've had issues my whole life, but a few years ago was really like that breaking point for me. And there was a day where I woke up and I just said to myself, I'm not going to do anything that doesn't bring me joy anymore. And I know that sounds silly to some people because they're like, listen, girl, you find joy in doing those dishes with 8 people in your house? Probably not. But it's about if I'm not presented with joy, I'm going to go look for it. And if I can't find it, I'm going to create it, period, end of story. And I know that you've lived your life very much. You've been outspoken about that, about finding joy and creating joy with everything that you've been through in your life. One of those things is being a veteran. First of all, I know how you feel about this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Thank you for your service.
No, thank you.
Because my dad is a veteran and I have other veterans in my family. My cousin has been on the show herself and she's an Army veteran. And we've had several guests on that are veterans. And it really, I know that you guys hear that a lot, but there's not often, the action behind it or the real emotion or feeling behind it. But I assure you here, we are beyond grateful. But tell us, really briefly about your history with the military and when did you join and what did that look like for you?
Okay. So I graduated high school at 18 and my uncle was in the Air Force Reserve. And so one day he asked me, what are you going to do when you graduate? I'm like, I'm not sure. I don't really know what dreams I had at that time. And so he was like, well, you should check out the military. I was like, yeah, I saw him in his, blue uniform and things like that. So he was like, look, check out the military, but go to the reserves first. Don't go full time first, because if you go full time first and you don't like it, you're going to be stuck for however many years you signed up. If you sign up for 3 years or 4 years or 6 years, you're going to be stuck. But if you go to the reserves, you can see what it's like. And if you like it, you could always transfer it and go full time. So I initially sat down and looked at it and was like, you know what, let me go look at that. So I went and took the ASVAB test. And lo and behold, a National Guard recruiter came to my grandmother's house and offered me a $2,000 bonus. Hey. and at 18, I was like, oh, I could get a car. Like, oh, I could do a little bit of stuff with that. So he told me about the National Guard and the mission, state emergencies and things like that. And 2 weeks training, 1 week in a month. So I was like, you know what, that's what my uncle was talking about. So I'm like, I'm interested. So I signed up and had a great time. And about the 4th year of my reserve status, I said I could do this full time. And so I chose to go active duty. And 20 years later, with 24 years total service, I retired in 2013.
I know that one of the things that you are very outspoken about and that I've seen in the people that I know that have been served in the military as well is the importance of mental health for our veterans. And what is it about? Is it something that you've struggled with personally, or is it just in seeing it in other people that you've served with?
Yeah. Now, I had a great career and I can say that to you today at 51. But I tell you, looking back, and the journey in that conversation, I could tell you that I did have some struggles. And the transition, I could tell you that at 19, when I officially, had joined, it was in basic training. I remember being on my bunk, one night after some maneuvers that we were training on, and I was looking up at the ceiling, like, and this thought came into my mind, like, what are you doing here? And it was like, when I thought about like, what am I doing here? I could tell you, my brain clicked, and I clicked over from that 19-year-old kid to that soldier. And from that moment on through basic training, it became a routine. I took everything a different level of seriousness because I saw that what they're training us is how we're going to survive. And so it was not a joke. And so some of the things that they said to us, like, don't daydream and worry about where your girlfriend is at or your wife is at home. Like, you could get your squad killed by daydreaming like 2 seconds. So all these things that they shared with us, I took it to heart. Like, this is going to be it. This is going to be my journey. And not understanding that, shift, I could tell you that for me, my identity was trapped in that camouflage. And it's great. It's not a bad thing, because we have pride. We have all these things, ego that gets, we all deal with. But there was a level of pride that was in that camouflage. And I could tell you, I lost myself in my career because I was so into that job and the different jobs that I had, 3 different MOSs. So I had, different educations and just my background. So I could tell you that part of my issue was the identity crisis. So when my military career came to an end, and not by choice, not because I wanted to get out, but because of some medical issues, I'm like, my life is over.
Right.
And so that conversation right there triggered what I would say spiraled into this mental health. Because I played basketball, like I was an athlete. So we have mental toughness, like we all have mental toughness,
Right.
but there's something in there that if you don't really understand what that is, it could be the one little slight thing that takes you off your course. And I saw myself when I had my exertion injury with sickle cell trait and rhabdo. I saw myself kind of like spiraling, especially when I got the notice that I was going to be on a medical board. Like that notice of being on a medical board, I made it mean my life is over. And so we have to pay attention to our subconscious mind. Our subconscious mind keeps us safe. It protects us, but also it is not our friend, and it will tell you some stuff that's not the truth. And I downloaded that information into my heart, and I started looking for all the evidence of why my life was over. So from 2006 until 2011, 2013, even today, I still have to now manage, is my life is over because of opening that space.
Right.
Right. And so once you start finding evidence, it's challenging to let that evidence go. And so I believe that for myself only, I don't like to generalize my conversations, but for myself, it was my identity, and that triggered all the other stuff in my life from my past that I didn't realize that I was dealing with as well. So the military seems to enhance why we join the service. Like for the reasons people do it, because they're homeless, people do it because they want education, people do it for many reasons we join the military. But you have to be careful what that reason is, because if that reason gets taken away, then you could be lost in that career. And the military they don't really have a lot of grace for you if you get in trouble. So
Right.
so you could do great all your whole career and make
Yeah.
one mistake and it costs you your whole career. So
Right.
those are the things that a lot of us deal with, whether it's you get in trouble or even a health issue.
The one thing I've seen, and just listening to your story, but also other people that I know, is a little bit of a lack of support. And I'm curious what your perspective is. Do you feel like there is a lack of support for the mental health of the soldiers while they're in the military, as they're transitioning out of the military, or is it a combination of both that you feel like might need to be changed?
I want to say, from what I understand now, it has improved. But during my time from 89 until 2013, we do have mental health classes once a year is how they did that.
Once a year.
Yeah. And then you do have health and wellness checks, of course, throughout, the activities of your station. But I don't think people really get in depth of how important that is, just as much as you doing your job, right? Because life happens and you have to have this career. And so if I compare, which I don't like to do a lot, but athletics and military, similar experiences, because an athlete is dealing with their identity crisis as an athlete, and as a veteran, we're dealing with ours. And if you don't deal with your life in those moments that they start to happen, you have athletes who never deal with the divorce or the breakup or the grandparent dying or all these different girlfriend breakups. But oh no, you better go play football. You better go throw that pass. Like,
Right.
you got to get to college. And so the military is the same way. Oh, you better put that aside. Like, if you were supposed to have a wife, we would issue you a wife. Like all these kind of things.
Yeah.
And then you never really get to mentally deal with that. At some point in your life, those things are gonna arise, and you're gonna have to figure out how to work those out. And those are the things that I'm learning from my experience that I want to help now interject. Because if a veteran who's out of the service didn't get that kind of support, then how can we provide it for them now so they could figure out their life from today and not, live in that what I had called the future of uncertainty.
Yeah.
So I was able to kind of even figure out where my stress issues was coming from in two places. We say depression and anxiety. So if you understand those two, depression is from your past, and then anxiety is from the future.
Right.
So if you're dealing with both, so I'm dealing with my past, issues that rose up in my life that I saw, and then I'm living in the future of uncertainty, like my life is over. So how is your present time stable? It doesn't work.
Right. Right. What kind of support is available out there for veterans? And is there anything that you can think of that maybe the majority don't realize exists as far as support goes?
So I think, not that I think, but for people and for myself, I'll just use myself as an example. I'm not a combat veteran, although I did serve during the war in state to train our soldiers and Iraqi soldiers together for that war. That was my contribution. But at the same time, we do train how you're going to fight. So you are prepared to do whatever, when called to do. I say my mom's prayers, kept me out of those areas. So I do acknowledge that. However, being able to understand that we all have some type of thing we need to work on, and the VA does provide that. I didn't think I fit in the VA mental health system because most of it is focused on combat stress issues, right? So I didn't think, I'm like, so if you're a circle and the programs are made for squares, where do I fit in? Right. And so I never saw myself fitting in those programs that the VA offer. So I was able to be introduced to a personal development course that kind of helped me interrupt one of those 3 choices of committing suicide, which is, a reason to live. So because I discovered that one little piece of why I wanted to live, I was able to maintain my mental health. But if you don't find one of those 3, then you could actually people take their life. So I want to say to veterans, the VA system, they have great programs. They do. When I took the cognitive behavior course, so at first I took the grievance course because my dad passed away 2 years ago. And that led me to the VA to go back for my mental health stuff. Because when I went years ago, they tried to give me medication. I'm like, I'm not trying to take no drugs. I'm not, that's the first thing they want to give you, and I'm like, I know I have more mental toughness than I'm experiencing, and I don't want to succumb to having to take drugs and walk around like a zombie. So I fought my doctor on having to take medication. And like I said, the personal development courses that I got into, and then that led me back to the grievance courses that they offer because of my dad passing away. And then my psychologist was like, any more work you want to do? And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Since I'm here, and I had heard about cognitive behavior from my sister who does social work and mental health. And she was like, bro, you need cognitive behavior classes. And so when I remember what she said to me, I told the doc, hey, this is where I'm at and I want to take this. He says, well, this is again for combat, but we could still use the same principles and help you, sort out what you're dealing with.
Right.
It was the best thing. It was like the icing on the cake. And how that course worked and helped me unravel my thoughts. I mean, it was like the best. And so I had to look at the VA differently because even though the programs might seem they're 4 squares and you're a circle or a triangle or a rectangle, still put your life in there because those principles help across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like it's really that there are things available and it's a matter of choosing to take advantage of them. And it's really good to hear from you that there are things available, especially for those veterans who did serve in combat, because I know that's a kind of a different egg, so to speak. And so it's good to hear that they're available. It sounds like, a big message that you're passing on is to take advantage of what's there and use those things as you need them. We're going to take a quick break and talk to Ray, and we're going to come back more with Farron at the end. We'll be right back.
Breakthroughs are about more than you might think. They're about discovering who you are, digging deep, reaching to the core of your soul. They're about healing yourself, understanding your beliefs, creating a ripple effect. And it's not just those initial moments that matter. It's about using them to bring more joy into our own lives and the lives of others. It's about having fun, letting loose, enjoying every moment life has to offer. It's about finding a safe space. It's about creating connection. Join us each and every month for exclusive programming, where we invite you to go beyond the breakthrough. So we ask you, are you ready? We'll see you online at thebreakthroughshow.com.
Welcome back to the Breakthrough Show. I'm really excited to have my special guest today. He is our last guest of the season, at least our last official guest. I'm really excited to have him here. When we talked initially, he has so many moving parts to his story, including the audacity of being someone who doesn't like chocolate but owns a chocolate factory. How did that happen? I don't know. Please welcome entrepreneur, speaker, and just overall amazing, multi-passionate person. Please welcome Ray Blakeney to the show. Welcome, Ray.
Hey, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
Well, you have done so many different things in your life and in your business. And so I want to just start out by asking, have you always been very multi-passionate since you came out of the womb?
Maybe, but not consciously. So going back to my childhood, my background, I'm half Filipino, half American, right? So my dad's blonde, blue-eyed, 6'3". My mom's a 5'1" Filipino lady. But I skipped a grade when I was younger. So I was always considered small for my age, right? Because you don't think of it at the time, but the difference between a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old is actually quite a bit in size, right? So when I was a kid, I was actually really shy. And I think that might have held me back from being really multi-passionate. I thought I was really bad at sports because, again, I'm playing with kids who are 2 years older than I am when I'm 10. And they're bigger and stronger and taller than I am. So I was like, I must just be short. Again, I'm in the same grade as them, so I didn't really think about the 2-year age difference. So I didn't do it. The multi-passion, I think, started actually when I was about 25 or 26. When I kind of, you get out of college, you start finding yourself. You get out of school and you kind of start finding who you really are. You're no longer that, in the cool crowd. Like in school, we're all in these little cliques, but when you go into the real world, you don't necessarily have to be in those anymore. So I got a chance to be myself. I got a chance to do things without, oh my goodness, what do the kids at school think if I try this thing out? And nobody cared because there's always a clique that does whatever it is you're doing and you just make friends over there. So that's, I think, when it started. So I can't say that I might have had it since I was a kid, but I was too shy and probably my self-esteem was too low to take advantage of it until I was an adult.
That's a really interesting perspective because we've talked about, so many times over the last 5 seasons of the idea of being multi-passionate and multi-dimensional humans. And I think we've never talked about it from that perspective before of, I think I probably was, but I think there were things that held me back. Well, I know that you come from a background of corporate, where you were a computer engineer, but you described when we talked initially about being comfortable, but not really happy. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So in our last conversation, it actually occurred to me in my last conversation with you, right? It wasn't something I had actually thought about before, but I was in a very difficult place to break out of, which I think probably most people are there as well. I was in a job that paid well enough and I was comfortable. So what does that mean? It's very easy to break out of things when you're miserable, or at least to find the motivation to try something new when you're miserable. But it's really hard when you're okay, right? You're not great, something's missing, but you're okay. So because that gives you a big fear of, I'm going to lose this. Right? Not even everybody has the right to be okay or never gets to the okay. So why am I going to give up my okay with a chance of, doing something better in the future? It was really hard for me to break out of that, right? I had a condo downtown, a nice car, steady job that paid the bills, wasn't really stimulating, but it wasn't also, they didn't treat me bad. It wasn't like I hated my work either. But you spend 40 or 50 hours a week of your life in that, and you want to do that for 30 years, that thought eventually is what made me want to break out of that, right? I do not want to spend 30 years in this okay thing and then look back and I wish I had done that, which everybody says those are the biggest regrets people have in their life, is not what you did do, it's the stuff you didn't do. So yeah, I quit it. I joined the Peace Corps, and that's led me on the path to be an entrepreneur. It wasn't the plan, but it worked out.
Do you think that, what you saw from your family, from your parents or anybody else that was an influence on you, had an influence in allowing you to sort of move out of that better? Was that an influence on you?
Yes and no. So I'm lucky to have great parents. So I know everybody's not in that position, but I have a great relationship with my parents. I have a sister, same thing. And they were always supportive of everything I did. They were not entrepreneurs. They worked in the same company for 20 or 30 years. I think they changed job once, while I was with them. But they supported everything I did. So that helps a lot when you're trying to take the risk and your worst case scenarios. You always have a place to go. You have loving parents who will at least take you in. It's embarrassing, but the option of being homeless and on the street was not a realistic option, right? There was always a place for me to go. What they did do, probably unconsciously when I was growing up. So I grew up as an expat kid, what they call a third culture child. Parents from two cultures, and you grew up in the third one. And we traveled all the time. So that opened me up to the possibility of exploration, not only by moving to other countries, but in life, right? I saw that a lot of people are scared to go to a new place because all these bad things can happen, but I've been to 50 countries and no bad things ever happened. I got picked. The worst thing that happened was when I was living in Cleveland, Ohio, somebody stole my car. I never had any issues in the foreign. Somebody overcharges you for a taxi. How about that, right? I went to a foreign place, always a foreigner, and they charged us $50 for a $10 taxi ride. That's the worst thing that's ever happened. But when you kind of get into that mindset, not only about travel, but about life, chances are no matter what you do, that worst case scenario that all of us are thinking here, that little, devil in our head saying, don't do it because this will happen. It's probably not very likely that that's going to happen, right? Statistically, you might be hit by a car more likely than, any kind of violent crime happening to you when you travel. Right. If you start a business, the worst case scenario generally is not bankruptcy. It's going back to where you were before. Whatever your skill set is now, you could probably get a job doing what you are doing right now. It might take a few months. It might do all these kind of things, but if you really think about it, the worst case scenario is not failure and, end of life. That's what stops a lot of people. That's what the way my parents raised me, I think, taught me. Nothing is final. Worst case scenarios almost never happen. And if you spend your entire life worrying about those worst case scenarios, you're going to have a very, very disappointing life to yourself. I truly believe that.
I love that you talk about this idea of exploration as a child and how you feel like that helped you, because that's a very similar theme to what I talked about when my friend Hannah Donji was on the show. And that was that she, very similar to you, had parents from two different backgrounds and then grew up in a very different country as well. And so her parents, though, what she said was that they gave her the space to explore these different things in life, and that ultimately helped her. And I think tied in, because she's very multi-passionate as well. And so I think ties into that, the idea of giving children the space to explore different things and ask questions. That's a huge one too. Do you see you being that kind of dad to your son as well when he gets older?
Oh, absolutely. We're actually planning it right now. So as I mentioned, as you can tell, I speak English a little bit. And my wife, while she studied college in the United States, so she speaks English, she's a native Spanish speaker. So English and Spanish is given. We're looking to move to Taiwan in the next 18 to 26 months because we want him to have a third one. So, and so he's going to be a third culture child. He's going to have a similar upbringing to mine. He's going to be a native speaker, almost, a fluent native speaker of Mandarin, Spanish, and English by the time he's 5. I mean, he's hopefully he'll be at a point where if he spoke Spanish, you'd think he was Mexican. If he spoke English, you'd think he was American. If he spoke Mandarin, apparently Taiwanese have a slightly different accent than the mainland China, but at least you'll think he's a native speaker just with the accent from Taiwan. Yeah. And that's an advantage we want to give him. He's got to go to college. I mean, it's just in the family. But the thing is, I don't care what he studies, because if you could speak those 3 languages, your opportunities in your life right now are infinite, right? I mean, there's so many places you can work, so many things you can do just by speaking those languages and having those cultural experiences, understanding the Mexican culture, understanding the American culture, and understanding the Chinese culture as a growth for a child.
I know that you've done several different businesses, and I mentioned one of them about the chocolate factory. How in the world, how do you go from not liking chocolate to going, hey, I should run a place that makes that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. Just as though you know, I sold off my stock in that yesterday, even though I'm good friends with my partner, and so I no longer do own the chocolate factory, but I owned it for about 4 or 5 years. I owned 51% of a chocolate factory. So this was about 7 or 8 years ago. I've mentored a few people who wanted to start their own businesses, and I was mentoring this girl in the Philippines, where I'm originally from, and she wanted to start what they call a BPO, business process outsourcing company. Pretty standard in the Philippines, call center, right? Everybody in the Philippines has a call center. She wanted to copy everybody else. So she asked me to mentor her. I knew her through a family member, and that's how we got in touch. So I mentored her a few years. Smart girl, call center, didn't work out, too much competition. Her parents had grown up very poor, but they had built a small, successful, low-level chocolate company. And in the Philippines, they have these chocolates called tableas. They have them in Mexico as well. So if anybody's bought like abuelita chocolates, it's just this really unprocessed chocolate that they put in these tablets, and you put it in milk, and then they just boil it down and it makes chocolate milk, right? It's just sugar and cacao, and there's nothing to it. And they made enough to send their 3 daughters to college doing that, right? They came out of poverty. They didn't even have secondary school education. They were able to do it. But that was the level of their business. I don't know the exact income, but I would say $2,000-3,000, which in the Philippines is quite a large sum of money, but they were doing that. So this girl, her business didn't quite work out, but then she found out about a scholarship in Ghent, Belgium, where they were paying people from the developing world. You applied for it, and they were bringing 10 people over there to study with the chocolatiers of Godiva for an entire year over in Ghent, Belgium. And she talked to me. She's like, do you think I should apply? And I'm like, yeah, go for it. I mean, this is a great opportunity. So she applied, she got it. So she went to Belgium. We stayed in touch. We were just talking and all that time. She loved it. She became the first certified Belgium chocolatier in the entire country of the Philippines. So she went back there, and she, we were still talking. So she talked to me, and she was like, look, I have the knowledge. I even have the supply chain because my parents at least get the raw cacao. I want to start producing local high-end luxury chocolates in the Philippines, but I don't have the capital to buy the machines and set up the factory. Would you be interested in investing? So I talked to her, and I went to talk to my wife. I'm like, honey, would you like free chocolate for the rest of your life? She's like, yeah. And my wife was like, yes, of course I would. I'm like, okay, good. I think we're going to start a chocolate factory. So I was the investor there, and I took care of the business operations and marketing end of things. That's kind of my specialty. In all my businesses, I tend to be the the business person, and I always work with somebody who's got the specialty. Like my primary business,
Right.
livelingua.com. I'm not a language teacher. My wife is. So we started it together. I do everything around it to make sure it works. And she focuses on quote unquote the product. It was the same thing with Ginto. It's still there. You can go to all the high-end stores in the Philippines and buy our chocolate, Ginto chocolates in the Philippines. And my partner Dollar Each took care of the day-to-day operations. I took care of kind of the high-end marketing, strategy, supply, all that kind of stuff.
That's so fun though. And I mean, you've kind of blown it out of the water just with that example of the idea of that you have to be really good at something to invest in something or have a business at all. Because I think that, what you're sharing is about the importance of the back end of it as well, that you don't have to be this front and center person to have a business.
Absolutely. In fact, most people don't believe it. I'm an introvert, right? So I don't actually want people to.
You're lying.
I know, that's what everybody says. But yeah, I'm totally okay not being known for the business, right? I'm looking for more for the kind of, the building of it's so much fun to me. The whole process. How would I put it? People say follow your passion in the business, but for me in particular, that has not been my route for business. I find other people with passion, but without the business knowledge, and I help them build the business. So I either do the invest, I supply the, knowledge, capital, even sometimes staffing, because I have staff from my other businesses, and I help them build up their business if I think their idea is a good one. And I'm an engineer, so I have mathematical way. I do mathematical analysis. I don't trust my gut. My gut's kind of dumb. So if I trusted my gut, I'd be living on the street right now. So I kind of go with I use math to figure out whether the business has a chance of succeeding. And then I have a methodology that I go through and I just run it for every business. And you usually know within about 2 years whether it's working or not, and how well it's going to work. And that's it. So, and then I hire people to run them, and then I move on to the next shiny object.
Well, tell us a little bit about what you're working on now, Ray. I know you've done a lot of different things, and now I find out I was hoping to get some chocolate, but we're moving on. What are you working on?
Hooked up. I told you, I'm good friends with the owner. It was a very amicable, she bought me out. It's totally good friends over there. So I'm working on two things right now. So my main business is livelingua.com, where we have the third largest online language school in the world. My wife and I run that. We've been running that for 13 years now. But we're the only mom and pop language school out there in the top 5. Everybody else has millions of dollars from big, rich investors on Wall Street. And we're that guy going up against Starbucks. Me and my wife at the coffee shop in the corner trying to go up against Starbucks. So far, we're surviving. The two new projects I'm working on, one is by accident and one is on purpose. So I launched a toilet paper holder store, e-commerce store 2 weeks ago. So that should be interesting to see if that works. That's by accident. So howmuchtoiletpaper.com, if anybody's looking for really cool toilet paper holders or even the standard stuff for a few bucks, just one for your house, we got you covered. We are the online toilet paper holder superstore. And the one I'm launching on purpose is a website called podcasthawk.com. It is for people to help find them podcasts, to appear on as guests. We have built a search engine from the ground up. So right now, if you want to go on Google and say, hey, I'd like to be on podcasts like Jessica's, right? Business podcast or inspirational podcast, whatever that may be. Good luck. You Google that, try to find results. Yeah, you might find 10 or 20, and half of those haven't made new episodes in the last 2 years.
Right.
Really, really hard. So this was the challenge I was facing back in March, right? So I was looking to help promote Live Lingua a little bit more. I'd like to get on some podcasts. How can I do it? So I did the Google search. I tried looking on iTunes. Yeah, that didn't work at all. Finding their search is awful. So it's a computer program. I'm like, okay, there's got to be a better way to do this. So I, spent a quick weekend. I'm like, is there a way to get every podcast episode and podcast review into a database from iTunes and Spotify? Weekend, I'm like, yeah, it's possible. I didn't get them all in a weekend, but I just did like a little test that it's possible to physically do that. I got like 100, right? Can I get their emails and contact information? Next weekend, I went in there. I'm like, that's possible too. So that's where the idea started. We spent 6 months getting every episode, every podcast, every review, and every email into a database. And now we've made this really cool and slick, and I give all credit to my programming team, as while I'm a programmer, I don't have time to be doing it full time anymore. And they're a lot better at it than I am. Going back to what we talked about before, I am not the best programmer in the world. I have people who are much better than me. So you can go in there and say, let's say, I have a travel blog. And I want to promote it to new audiences, right? It's very hard to get your blog in front of people, you know, if you're starting right out. But you've traveled a bit. That's why you have a travel blog and you have some cool travel stories to share. So you go into Podcast Hawk and you're like, okay, go in there and say, I'm looking for podcasts in the travel category. My specialty is Latin America. So that let's say in the description, they say Latin America somewhere, or in any episode they have used description, they've used the word Latin America. So, you know, they've interviewed at least one person from Latin America in the past. I want to make sure they've been around for a while. So they have at least 26 episodes. I want to make sure they haven't launched an episode in the last 30 days. So they're still active, and I want them to be good. So they should have over 4.5 star reviews. I challenge anybody to go and find those podcasts manually themselves on Google or on iTunes. It'll take you weeks or months.
Right.
On this one, you just hit search, and in 2 to 3 seconds, every podcast that matches that criteria appears in your account. We're launching the beta next week, where you can just download 100 emails and you can reach out to them. And what we're building on top of that is a system that will actually even do the emailing for you. That'll probably be out in about 3 to 6 months.
What?
And it'll be on autopilot. You would just you find 5,000 podcasts that are there. Depending on your plan, it'll say, okay, I want to email 200 of those a month. We get a great response rate. So let's say you get a low response rate of 3%. 200 a month means you're getting on 6 podcasts every single month on autopilot. I mean, literally, you're sitting back and they're like in your inbox, pick a date. That's all you're doing. I got 34% response rate when I did mine. So literally, I sent out 100 emails on that test. You know, I downloaded and I emailed it myself. I got on 34 podcasts. That, in my book, that backfired. I was like, I was not planning on being on 34 podcasts. This was back in November. In like 30 days, I was like a full-time podcast guest. And that's what the system will do for you. So if you're looking to kind of grow your personal brand, you're looking to grow your podcast, your YouTube channel, whatever it is, and we're not charging, you know, huge amount. The beta is $49 a month. You know, how are you going to find, you know, try getting on 50 podcasts for $49 a month anywhere else. And that's what will help you do it. So as you can see, this is where my mind is. This is what I'm passionate about right now. Hopefully it'll be successful within 2 years. In 2 years, I'll be working on something else. But right now, this is where 99% of my focus is going.
It's working on it and then on to the next thing, changing the world one business
once
at a
it
time.
works. Exactly. Once it works, it's the building that's my creative process, right? Once it works, I kind of lose interest because it's a different skill set. My respect to people who kind of can run businesses, because that's about executing the same thing every single day meticulously and kind of growing it incrementally. But to me, at least, the creative is kind of out of it at that point, and that's when I lose interest. I told you I have a family of artists. This is my art platform. This is my medium. So it's no longer art at that point.
I love that the idea of that too, though, because I think so many people feel like in order to be creative, they have to sing or paint or, you know, do something that we deem as creative. And you're on the back end of things and you're building. It's like Lego, but for businesses.
That's exactly it. I've used that analogy before. I mean, you know, I have all these pieces and you just kind of have to see, okay, this time he wants a horse. So how can I put these pieces together to make a horse, right? And sometimes it'll work and sometimes it won't work. And the horse's leg is a little short. So I got to fudge and figure out how to get that, you know, but that's what building a business is. You have the pieces, you have to put them together to get to the same goal. But it's interesting enough that every time you get there, it'll be something different.
Right. Well, Ray, this has been an absolute pleasure. We could talk forever, but I'm trying to be disciplined here. I'm trying to be good. And I just think that there's so many points that you've made about just business, of course, but life in general that I think people can really take home, and wishing you so much success with everything that you pick up. Not that you need it, but you're doing great. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks, Jessica. It was a blast.
Absolutely. Let everybody know also where they can find you, Ray.
Sure. So through my businesses, livelingua.com, livelingua.com, podcasthawk.com, podcast, and then the animal hawk, HAWK.com. For Live Lingua, just go to the About Us page. I put my email right there. We're a family-run business, so you can contact us there. Podcast Hawk, we bootstrap. So I might have 2 programmers working for me, but you go to the Contact Us page, that comes right into my inbox. I am customer support right now, at least. And then the final things is through social media. You can look me up on Facebook. I feel old saying Facebook, but that's fine. RayBlakeney.com. Look for a picture of a guy sword fighting, Japanese sword fighting kendo. then you found the right guy. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and you can follow me on Twitter. Ray Blakeney at all of them. All of them have a sword fighting photo, so I stick out from the other ones.
Awesome, Ray. Thank you so much for being here. And all of you guys, make sure you check out the show notes where you can find clickable links to be able to connect with Ray. And we're going to be back in just a minute for more of the Breakthrough Show. Welcome back to the Breakthrough Show. I want to give a big thank you to my special guest today, Ray Blakeney. It was great to have him here. Make sure you check out the show notes where you can find all of his information. And we are back now with Farron, and he is going to tell us about the 8 million things he does in this world. No, we were just having a conversation off screen about, being multi-passionate. And sometimes we have to have that boundary of going like, do we need to take on 20 more things? And so I'm hoping to have him back, and we'll have more of that conversation as well. But I know that you are a big voice for the sickle cell community. You want to tell us a little bit about that, how that has affected your life and why that's important to you?
Definitely. As I mentioned in my other segment, I joined the military at age 19. And through my career, I had some health complications that I didn't know was actually happening to me. In '99, I found out I had sickle cell trait I was transferring to an infantry company to be a supply sergeant. So I had to do a physical, my second physical in the military. And the Air Force base that I was near found my trait. And so he asked me, do you know you have sickle cell trait? No. Okay. But he gave me no brochure, no warning signs, like nothing about, I'm like, okay, I have a cousin with sickle cell disease. He's like, no, it's not the disease. You're just a trait carrier. Make sure you don't mate with another person and have a child with the disease. But and I'm like, okay, cool. I mean, I was 29. So anyone here out the other, I'm packing up my house, I'm moving my family to across country. So I never thought about that conversation again. And then in 2006, I was at my Master Sergeant Academy school, ANOC, they called it. And like twice a year, we take the APFT, the PT test. And that morning I got up and I did the push-ups, sit-ups, and I was out doing the 2-mile run. And on that last lap, we're trained to sprint. And so my subconscious mind kicked in like, hey, let's get this run over with. The clock is like 15:45. So I'm like, oh, I'm doing pretty good. So let me sprint and get my best time, of course, for that school. And when I came across the finish line, I basically collapsed.
Wow.
And they rushed me to the hospital, and the doctor came in and saw my kidneys having problems, but he said it was just freak accident, heat stroke, dehydration. So he gives me 2 IVs and sends me back to the barracks. And then that night I got worse, so they rushed me back to the hospital that night, and they diagnosed me with a condition called rhabdomyolysis, which is a skeletal muscular disorder. So my muscle enzymes were leaking into my bloodstream, releasing toxins and negative potassiums. And so I had renal failure. had skeletal muscular damage, joint damage, and had no idea. It wasn't even connected to
Wow.
sickle cell trait in 2006. It was just the rhabdo. And then 4 years later, the officer that I served with during the war, I was platoon sergeant, he was platoon leader. And I seen him on the base one day after leaving a mental health appointment. And he's like, "How you been?" I'm like, "You don't want to know." He's like, "Tell me." So I'm like, "Man, I can't barely walk. I'm over here taking these mental health classes." He's like, "Oh, something like that happened to me where my muscles locked up, but I have sickle cell trait. So I have to drink extra water, take these vitamins." And this is 2010. And I'm like, "Why does that sound familiar?" And then I remember my physical from 1999.
Right.
And that set me on my journey to go research. I took that to my rheumatologist because I'm living with arthritis issues. And she was able to put those two together with the rhabdo. And then we found that people have been dying and collapsing from sickle cell trait exertion in the military, athletes, people just hanging out in Denver skiing, like all these different cases. And so when I discovered that that was my issue, from my life being over to now discovering that I have a voice in another conversation, and that what's next is what has me in front of you today. And so in my sharing with veterans, when I meet veterans, one of the conversations is we have to find out what our what's next is, because we get so stuck in that identity crisis,
Right.
and life is over. But and we miss that camaraderie. There's things that we miss, that brotherhood and sisterhood that people, as we say, civilians, you just won't understand.
Right.
You know, and maybe the closest as a fraternity, probably, if I could describe it. But there's a sense of love and brotherhood and sisterhood that you don't lose, and you want that. It's not like, especially if you feel you get it from your family.
Yeah.
So then you have that connectedness, and when that's taken away, you feel alone. I felt, you feel a certain way. But I say find your what's next, because I found a whole nother community of people who live with sickle cell disease, who have sickle cell trait. 300 million people globally live with sickle cell trait.
Wow.
So I have a voice in a conversation that's impacting 300 million people plus. And then some of those people have children who have sickle cell disease, which is 100,000 or more in the United States. So when you see where your voice is, that gives you that strength to want to have a conversation, and then you find your peace, you find your place in that. So I a lot of times, and so you see the different things that I take on,
right?
Because I have a voice,
right?
I have a voice in mental health. I have a voice in sickle cell trait. I have a voice in arthritis. I have a voice in rhabdo. So I want people to understand that you have a voice.
Yeah.
You just have to find one that you care about, that matters to you today, and go find the people who are in that community. They're waiting for you to show up. They're waiting for you. And some people need that encouragement, and you might be that piece that encourages folks to live another day.
Right.
Maybe they find their voice to speak out about a conversation. So that's what I've been able to do. And it's opened up so many doors. Like I'm in the room with doctors and researchers just because of my sickle cell trait experience. And who would ever thought that, a retired sergeant first class could be sitting with scientists and doctors and researchers about my condition and helping them figure out what's going on. That's priceless.
I love how this conversation has come back around, and there's been a real theme about identity. And I think even in my own experiences, I've dealt with different health challenges. When you're presented with those things, you have to ask yourself, like, is this what I want my identity to be, and and like we were talking about briefly, the difference between having a voice and letting it consume you, be who the only thing you are. And I'm really hearing from you that there's value in that identity should you choose to use it for good, but it can also be something, I think, that can be very easily become all consuming. And I know for me, For me, it's become this, when someone tells me I have something, I get a new diagnosis or whatever it is, I get this fire in me that is like, you can't tell me that that's who I am. And so we're gonna, and so I feel that with you as well, that it's like, okay, well, thanks for telling me that. And now I'm gonna go use this to change the world. Get out of my way.
Yeah.
But
and also I'm not gonna make it seem like it's peaches and cream, because the identity that you mentioned, I had to step out of that because I got caught in this sickle cell trait advocate identity, because there would be times I want to go to a health fair, but I don't want to speak. Like, I don't want to talk about sickle cell trait today. But then I felt bad because, well, this is what you said you wanted to do, and you have people here and you should be talking to people. Right. So the identity, I still have to figure out who Farron is, as it's at the core of who Farron is. Not Farron the advocate for sickle cell trait, not Farron the advocate for veteran suicide, but who is Farron, so I can be at peace with that person and then have a voice in these conversations. And that's still the journey and the struggle today, because that identity, we can easily drop our identity in these other conversations, and then you get consumed, and it unfortunately sometimes defines us. Right. And then you get stuck in that, and then now you know, and so being able to, you know, now kind of like figure out who Farron is and what I care about, and having voices in these conversations, still work. It's still work. It's fun because you get to meet people, and I have, you know, different talk shows that I do, from the Revolution Radio show on KCA Radio to the Farron Dozier show on Sunday nights, to a blog talk show that I have since 2010. I mean, so I have platforms to meet people and talk to people. Yeah. But at the same time, sometimes I don't want to talk. Right. Sometimes I don't want to talk.
I get that. Well, this has been amazing. I gotta stop myself before we talk for 12 more hours. And so I would love for you to tell everybody what's the best place they can find you, Farron, to hear more from you.
FarronD.com has everything that I'm up to for the different conversations. So FarronD.com will take you to all of my nonprofit advocacy work, to my talk shows.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here today, my friend. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, you guys, it's been another fantastic episode. I want to give a big thank you to Ray Blakeney and, of course, Farron Dozier for being here today and finishing up our last guests of the season. We are so excited to be back next week with some Where Are They Now catch-ups with some of our past guests on the show. And I want to thank every single one of you for being here, watching or listening wherever you are in the world. And until next week, I want to remind you to make every day a great day for a breakthrough. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Breakthrough. Please visit our website at www.thebreakthroughshow.com and be sure to join our